And the test that I had taken on the sawhorses, and I had passed that test, and years later I came back to that same mill, and one of those sawhorses was still there. It had saw cuts in it. It had burned places because the millwrights were using it and cutting torches and welders and all of that. But I passed the test and I was able to go back and see the results of that test. Jesus wants to test our lives, and He is going to. Abraham was tested. He promised him a son in his old age. He was about 100 years old when his son was born. Now it looks like everything should go smooth after he passed that test, but it didn't. He had a greater test coming, and that was, I want you to give that son back to me. I don't always understand God's working in God's ways. If I ever get to the place where I can understand all of His ways, I'll probably be God or be assistant God. But we'll never get to that place. But the thing of it is, we move on to something greater. He tests us. In school, they asked me to take a test, and I hated to take tests. In fact, I don't want you kids to hear this. Would you hold your hands over your ears? I hated school. Did anyone else ever hate school? Oh, I'm not by myself. Did you hate school?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Well, why didn't you raise your hand?
They're tired.
Oh, excuses. But anyway, does anyone know about Trojan? The PGE nuclear power plant? My company had asked me, then I don't like tests, they asked me to go up there and become qualified to become the maintenance guy at Trojan. And they said, you're going, and they handed me I don't know how many pages of stuff to study, and said, you're going to have to take a test. And first of all, I hate reading. I mean, after school, I hate reading. And I went up there with a group of probably around 100 people. And they said the first thing, they said, before you go in the classroom for all of this training, before you can be badged to go in on different sites of the property, you're going to have to pass a test. They take me into a room by myself. They put before me pages of questions. You've got to pass this test. They asked me questions such as, when you were a kid, did you like your mom and dad? Man, I can answer that. It was all true and false questions. 367 questions. That number is stamped indelibly on my mind. 367 questions. They asked me in that questionnaire, did you play with dolls when you were a kid? That's easy to answer. No, I'm a boy. I didn't play with dolls. They asked the question, do you feel like you're being followed? No, that's easy to answer. They asked me, one of the questions was, do you feel like you have a tight band around your head? That was easy to answer. I just got a little bit of hair. But they asked so many dumb questions. Can you imagine? 367 questions. One of the questions was, do you cry easy? Well, I go to church, and in those years we were having good old altar services. How many remember when we had altar services? Did you ever cry? Oh man, and you pray and seek God and cry and the glory come down? And sure, I cry easy. And they went on and went. And I was having eye problems that had not developed into the macular degeneration at that time. But it was quite a strain for me to go through 367 dumb questions. And to my amazement, these were true and false questions. That's the ones I like anyway. Easy to answer. I went back into the classroom. Is it all right if I ramble for a little while?
Yes, please.
I went back into the classroom, and they had warned us all in those years. We wore pagers, us foremans, and they said, if you want to check the bulletin board at break time, check and see if you have any messages. And at break time, I went back to the whiteboard back there, and they had a name there. They had Carl Bowles. Would you go to classroom such and such? I said, why do they want me to go to that classroom? My company knows where I'm at. They're paying for me to be up here. And there's no way they will want to contact me. So I looked at that a little further, and I said, they want me to go at a certain time to a certain classroom. So I watched my watch, and I went into this number 68 or whatever it was classroom. When I went to the door, there was a person sitting at the desk. And this lady had to open the door and let that person out and let me in, and then close the door behind me before she would ever ask me a question or tell me anything. And when I walked in there, she made sure that nobody would hear what she was saying. She closed the door before she said a word to me. And then she looked at me and she said, "You flunked the test." I didn't pass that test. And then she went ahead, there was conversation. She went ahead to tell me, "You're going to have to go and see a psychologist." Grant, have you ever had a test like that?
I was thinking a psychiatrist.
Well, hey, I made the mistake.
Tore that place down, so what are they talking about?
When I went in to see him, that's another story. And when I called him a psychiatrist, he excused that. He said, "I am not a psychiatrist, I'm a psychologist." So I offended him. But I had to see him, and when I finally got through with all of the questions he had to ask me, because I have to go through all of this if I want my reader card to be able to unlock doors and go in places that only certain people are supposed to go into, and I have to pass the test. So he asked me, he said, "Are you punctual?" And he asked me some simple questions, and I answered them. And then when he gets through, he says, "Now, do you have any questions?" And that's where I made the mistake. I said, "Yes." I said, "On that test that I took, that 367 questions, true or false, what did you see there that made you think that I needed to see a psychiatrist?" He said, "I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm a psychologist." So that's when he was offended. And anyway, to make a long story short, when I left out, he said, and the next time you go to see a psychologist, and he's not on time because he was late for his meeting with me, and I had tried to page him, and he said, don't try to get a hold of him. So everything went wrong. I didn't pass the test, but they gave me a, what do they call it, a do-over? They gave me a second chance, and I passed. What I think happened on that test, I think I answered too many questions right. I am thoroughly convinced. I mean, they weren't hard questions. No, I don't play with dolls. No, I don't have a tight band around my head. Sure, I cry easy. But they were looking for something that I didn't know what they were looking for, but I answered those questions truthfully and honestly. Now, I could go on and on with that, but let's move to Jesus. He wants to know what's in your heart. Are you willing to do whatever it takes to pass the test? I failed a test years ago at a church. A church had invited me to come and be their pastor, or to preach one of their tryout sermons. You know, that's what we call it, tryouts. And I went in, and when I walked up the sidewalk up to the steps, there was an old fellow that came out just almost shouting hallelujah. He was so excited. And he said, you're going to be our next pastor. I was carrying my wife's accordion case. And he had seen in a vision, the next pastor, his wife will play an accordion. They were thrilled because this is passing the test as far as he was concerned. We went into that service that morning and we had a hallelujah time. That afternoon we made a mistake. We went to eat lunch with some of the people of the church. They just had a shouting good time. This pastor is going to be our new pastor. Everything we prayed for has lined up, line upon line, precept upon precept. He's going to be our new pastor. They had their business meeting. We didn't get the church. Now, I had already made plans because I knew we was going. 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, we had a holiday. And I thought, well, I'm just going to drive back over to that city. I'm going to meet some of those people that we had such a good time with and find out what happened. And when I drove up in front of the house and they saw me, one of them got on the telephone and called one of the other people of the church, and Brother Bowles is here. He's going, this is what we've been praying for. We prayed, if it's still your will for him to be our pastor, he'll show up. And lo and behold, there we were. We showed up. So everybody got all excited again, or not everybody, but some of them got excited. They called me back. We want you to be our pastor. They voted, and it was voted in. What I didn't know, there was two types of people in the church, and they told me after I got there as the pastor, 5 years later, I had already pastored another church. They called me up and said, would you come and preach for us? We think maybe we want to consider you as a pastor of the church. So I went back and preached, and make a long story short, I got the church. But I got my way, I got the church. But did you know that was one of the hardest churches I ever pastored in my life?